Hi, I'm Caroline and welcome to my corner. Today, we are going to be talking about how I prep my paintings. I typically like to paint on these small wood panels as you've seen on my channel before, and you can either buy them from the store pre-gessoed, which I do like to do a lot, but sometimes they're out of the size that I need, and so I go about the process of gessoing it and prepping it. If you paint directly on wood with something like oil or acrylic, the wood over time will soak it in and it'll dull your colors and fade out the painting, which we don't want to happen. We want these bad boys to last forever. I like to prep my paintings this way for a few reasons. I like to do it for a level of control of the painting process. It helps the painting to last longer because if you paint directly on wood, the paint will soak in and you'll lose all the bright colors of your painting eventually. And honestly, I just really like starting with a fresh canvas. It helps to just start with something white and fresh and blank, so that way I can go from there. Today, I actually had a bunch of panels that I needed to prep, and so I decided to make this video, but I'm prepping 4 different panels. I have 2 paintings that I wasn't quite satisfied with. I actually do a lot of plein air when I go to the beach, or sometimes I sit at a park, and it's more of a practice of just being in person and getting those colors and lights. And I didn't want to waste the money to buy a whole new panel, and so instead I just decided to gesso over it so that way I could have a fresh surface when I started a new painting. This is the way I do this gessoing thing. It's probably not the right way or the best way, but it's my way, and that's the way I'm going to teach you today. As you can see here, I'm briefly painting some water onto the panel, and then I'm following it up with my gesso. And I'm using heavy gesso here because by putting gesso on this canvas, it gives your paint something to adhere to. It enables your painting to not yellow or discolor over time, which is quite important if we want these bad boys to last forever. The gesso I like to use is typically meant to be watered down before application. As you can see here, I am painting the panel with a little bit of water and then adding the gesso in, and just a tiny bit of gesso because the gesso I use is quite thick, and so it needs these small layers to be able to build up. When I'm painting the gesso, I'm using a basic chip brush. It's just something cheap. I think I got it for $2. Here though, I'm painting in different directions. I go down, I go across, and by doing that, it makes it so that the gesso is penetrating every which way. Then I recommend to let your painting dry for, 30 minutes or so. And then when it's fully dry, you can go in with a piece of sandpaper and sand it down. Typically, I actually like to use an orbital sander to do this process, but that would have just gotten way too messy for the filming of this video. So I'm using a small piece of sandpaper. I got at the store, cut it up, and this is something you can easily do at home too. I'm sanding with 100 grit sandpaper. It knocks down that brush strokes, as 100 grit is like the grittiest sandpaper you can get. It's bringing down those big brush strokes and those big layers that you're wanting to smooth it down into one even surface, and creates a nice base texture. Sometimes it's good to be able to wear a nice dust mask when you're sanding a lot of gesso because it can just get in the air. I always make sure to have a window open just to stay safe. Here I'm placing down now the second layer of gesso, and I'm painting in multiple directions. As you can see, the crosshatch technique ends up building an even and balanced surface, which we really want here. You don't want to be painting the gesso just like every which way. I like to go like up, a bunch of up strokes and a lot of side strokes. If you're seeing too prominent of brush strokes, that's when it's time to switch directions. This process does take a lot of patience, and making sure to not rush the layers is definitely key. And here now I'm switching to the final step, which is the final sanding. I'm now going back in with a slight 100 grit. I'm not doing it as hard as I did before because we don't want to take all the gesso off. And then once I feel like it's at a good level, I'm taking a 200 grit sandpaper, sanding it down so I get a finer finish. Typically, I like to feel the surface with my hand to make sure the texture is all right, because visually it can be a little bit tricky to see if you got it right, and touching this canvas a lot during this entire process. Typically, I like it to feel quite smooth, but with a little texture, so that way it comes across in the painting, and that way it's just not super flat. But when I paint, I typically am using these flat brushes, and so I like to be able to just place the brush stroke and have it look clean and square and nice, and just creates the type of painting that I love. By painting on this type of surface, it just feels a lot smoother. I feel more involved when I gesso, even if it's more convenient to buy a pre-gessoed panel. The colors just sit differently, you're in more control, and it just you know your painting's going to be safe. Putting this prep work is essential to making your paintings more enjoyable and professional in a way. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching me prep 4 of these bad boys. My next step is to go on painting. I like to add a quinacridone magenta. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below and like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Bye.